not managed by a conservative. They're not managed.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum. My name is Laura McCletty, one of the facilitators for Tuesday Forum, along with Mary Johnson, Winston Robinson, Jackie Edward Walton, Natalie McGarrett, Dr. Thomas Moore, Steve Johnson, Shay, what's Shay's last name? Abdullah. Shay Abdullah, and Carlina Ivory. And we would like to welcome you, and we're asking our guests from the Park and Recreation Department. We have Mr. Bert, who is the Capital Planning Division Director, and Adrian Cox, who is the County Budget Director. Just to share with you, we do live streaming as well as Facebook Live, so we don't really know who our audience is. And the way that we conduct the business here is that we are the facilitators who will allow you to do presentations. And once you do your presentation, we will ask that by show of hands, we have questions that are being asked, and we facilitate the questions and answers. We normally, and we request one question at a time from each individual, and Natalie, who is our timekeeper, will raise the time if they go over 30 seconds in asking that question, and we'll give you so much time to answer it. We never know who's going to show up. We send the information out to over 1,000 people about the Tuesday Forum, who's going to come and speak. So we never know who's going to show up. We never know who's watching. But we find once we interact in the community that people are looking and listening and have comments about our speakers that we have. So welcome, and we like to always start off with a word of prayer as well. So if you would engage with me, bow your heads, please. Holy One, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion that would allow us to grow closer. And these blessings we ask in your name, amen.
Amen.
We do have coffee, and believe me, we have people that will be coming in and leaving respectfully. So don't let that be a discouragement at all. So without any further ado, we'll start. Are you going to start first? Adrian's going to start. And we're trying to get more of our staff and elected officials to attend the Tuesday Forum. And we have a variety of things that we do in the forum. But we're happy to have you this morning. And I was sharing with Adrian, just learning about what is involved with the Park and Recreation Department for Mecklenburg County. It's big, and it's been this way for years. For years, they do an awful lot that I learned when I was engaged with some of the things that they did with Park and Rec. Okay, we have an announcement at the end, and this is Mr. Winston Robinson's. This is one of the ideas he's brought to us. We like to have a time of silence for you to, a moment for silence, just silence your phones. Because we don't want your phones going off while we're conducting the business. So without any further ado, you can go ahead and get started, Adrian.
All right, well, thank you so much for the invitation today. What I'm going to be talking about is how do you engage in Mecklenburg County?
Excuse me, Adrian.
Yes.
So for the streaming audience, you'll need to use your microphone. I know it's a small room, but the audience outside.
All right. Well, let me stand up. There you go. That'll be easier for me. So anyway, like I said, thank you all for the invitation today. And what I'm going to be speaking about is how do you all engage with the county's fiscal year 2026 budget? And this is with respect to the entire budget, not just park and recreation. Bert is also going to talk about some things in park and recreation, but I'm going to talk about community engagement broadly with Mecklenburg County. So, to start off, this is a slide that is a little bit complicated, but it goes over all of the different ways that we engage with the public. We engage with the public around specific strategies. Each year we do a community survey that tells us, in essence, different things about how the community feels about our services that we provide. We engage with the community around any type of special issues when we're doing studies. So we have done engagements and surveys around things like what we will do with our opioid funding, as well as affordable housing, those sorts of things. And then those plans then inform strategies that we use to come up with options in the budget. In terms of capital engagement, all of the facilities that are built, including parks and rec, as well as schools and other things, a lot of that engagement occurs in those specific master plans. So there's a park and rec master plan. There's a master plan for the libraries. There's a master plan that the schools have. And they go out and they engage with the community about what is working, what is not working, and what they need to do in order to design facilities that will meet the needs of the community. That then feeds into the capital improvement plan, which is a multi-year budget. And the payment for the annual cost of our facilities is something that's carried in our annual budget. In our annual budget, we engage with the public through a variety of different methods. We have a budget priority survey, which is a very critical piece, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And I also have some cards to hand out, and I would encourage anybody to take the survey. We receive feedback from our advisory boards. We have a live budget simulator on our website where anyone can go in and they can make increases or decreases to portions of the budget to see if they can balance it or how they think that the budget should be, and then they submit that for us. We do outreach at different high traffic areas. We do virtual workshops where anybody in the county can attend. We also go out to college classes at all the different colleges in the county. We'll meet with community groups such as this one, and then we have 2 public hearings. And so all of that information we collect, we share it with our county manager, their executive team, and our board of commissioners to help inform the budget decisions that they're going to make. This is our budget calendar for the upcoming budget. Last night, we met the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Education. We held a joint meeting with them. We will have our first public hearing on January 22nd. Most counties do not have 2 public hearings for the budget. You are only, in North Carolina, required to have 1 public hearing. This is an extra one that our board does before they enter into their retreat. And so if you have an interest in speaking at that public hearing, I would encourage you to sign up because I'm sure they would love to hear the feedback. Our budget retreat will be January 29th through the 31st. After that, we'll go into a period of working with our departments, as well as working internally to put together the manager's recommended budget. We'll also have a survey that's live during that time. The survey is actually live now and you can take it, but we will begin doing a push broadly around February, trying to get as many people to take it as we can. CMS's budget request is due to the county on May 7th. The courts and CPC will submit theirs on May 13th. Manager's recommended budget is scheduled to come out on May 15th. We will do a detailed overview of the budget with our board there on May 21st, and then we will have the second public hearing on May 22nd. And that is typically a public hearing that has a lot more attendance than that first one, but it's after the manager's recommended budget before the board makes their final decisions. They'll do that when they do straw votes, and then finally adoption on June 3rd. So how do you share your input? So if you're wondering today, how do you get involved? First, there's that first public hearing that I mentioned on January 22nd. The link at the bottom of this slide, and you can also access that through the QR code that I'll hand out here in a minute. You can sign up to speak at that public hearing. we have a budget survey. We conduct this survey each year. We actually have, it's the same survey, but we will do a survey that anybody can take. We also have a sample that is representative. And we will take that survey and we will use that survey to help inform budget decisions. The survey is specific to Mecklenburg County and the things that we think may come up during the budget process. One thing you won't see when you take this survey is a question about education. And that is because we know from previous surveys that education is a very high priority. And also because of the way that the county funds education, we provide funding, but we largely do not control what happens with that funding afterwards. So that a lot of that is managed by the school board. We have the budget simulator, which is live year-round, and then we'll have that second public hearing on May 22nd. So last year, these were the top 5 priorities that were identified through our budget engagement based upon the need and the importance. And the numbers that you see here is the new funding that we allocated in the budget process. So the top one that we got from the community was improving access to affordable housing. The board allocated nearly $17 million toward improving access to affordable housing, and it is one of their core budget priorities. Behavioral health resources, they allocated $3 million, $3.4 million. Healthy food programs, so access to healthy food, we allocated $2 million. And then services for senior adults, we allocated $1.8 million of new money towards that, and then $11 million toward workforce development services. So the responses that we get back from the community from this engagement is very important, and we try to find ways that we can address those needs. So this slide summarizes the different things that the county and the city and the state does. This is not comprehensive, but this is just the major things. And this often comes up when we're engaging or when people are engaging with the county about what the needs are in their community. Sometimes it is a little bit, it's a little bit messy between who does what, and that's just the structure that we have. Primarily, counties are responsible for school buildings, but in Mecklenburg County, we also fund some of the operations of education. So we fund about a third of CMS's operational budget. The same is true for community colleges. We are responsible for the facilities, but in Mecklenburg County, we provide a small amount also to the operations of the community college. Jails, the county is completely responsible for the jails. The county is responsible for the court buildings, but the state is responsible for the operation within those courts. In Mecklenburg County, we also provide additional funding for public defenders, district attorneys, and those sorts of positions to try to help our system be effective. So those are state positions. We fund the elections, public health, a lot of our environmental services, homelessness services, social services, MEC pre-K, libraries, all of those things. The city is primarily responsible for law enforcement, although we do have some agreements with law enforcement agencies to provide that service in the unincorporated areas. So those are separate, and it makes up a small portion of the county. City streets. That is completely the responsibility of the city. So if you're driving on a street in Mecklenburg County, you are either on a city street, you are on a state-maintained road, or you may be on a private road, but there are no county roads. And then fire protection, the city primarily provides fire protection, your solid waste collection, so trash pickup, that sort of thing, the utilities, planning and zoning, and then the county is completely responsible for the transit, even though we do play a role in some of that decision-making process. And then the state, as I mentioned, is responsible for education. That's a large commitment that they have. The community college, mental health is primarily managed by the state, although we do play a role in that as well. And then workforce development. And then there's several things that we do which are shared services. Again, this is not a comprehensive list, but it's meant to give kind of a broad view of what each entity does. I have a whole lot of slides, not here, but I have a whole lot of slides with a lot of pie charts and breakdowns of what makes up the county's budget. But I like this slide because this slide shows it just kind of in one chart. So in one chart, what we've got is all of the different functions that make up education and literacy. So our funding to CMS, our funding for school debt, MEC pre-K, the libraries, some nonprofits that we fund. That makes up 41% of our total budget. For health and human services, which is all of the social services, public health, our community support, support for homelessness, that makes up 16% of our budget. Government facilities, which are just the government buildings, not counting the schools, but just the government buildings, operating those buildings, as well as the maintenance, that's 13%. Parks and environment and land use, that's 10% of our budget. Justice and public safety, which is largely operating the jail through the sheriff's office, that makes up 8%. Administration and internal support, which includes IT, HR, the manager's office, our attorney, that makes up 4%. We have 4%, which is just pass-through money. So it's money that we receive as the county, and it gets passed through to another entity. A lot of that is like transit sales tax. We receive a portion of that because of the mechanics of how that sales tax works, but it goes completely to CATS to operate the transit system. And then we have financial services, including tax collection and tax assessment. And then these other category is elections and register of deeds, which doesn't fit really neatly into any of the others. But this is just in a snapshot what the county does. So the last thing, I do have this handout, and I will leave some with you, and I encourage you to share some with other folks and take our survey. Like I said, you can take the survey now, but we'll be doing a bigger push on our survey in February. So that's what I have. I'll take questions now or just hand it over.
The next presentation.
All right.
Down goes to the next.
No, let me get you started.
Yeah. All right. We're sharing a laptop today. So Adrian's going to pull up my slide deck. And while he does that, I'll say good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hope you're doing very well. My name is Bert, Lynn. I'm the Capital Planning Division Director for Park and Recreation. I have lived in Charlotte for almost 25 years now. Came here right out of university. I worked in the private sector for about 13 years. 11 years ago, I had the opportunity to come and work in Mecklenburg County, first as a project manager. And then the last 6 years, I've been lucky enough to work for Park and Recreation. Capital Planning, the group that I'm a part of, oversees the long-range planning for our department for Park and Recreation. And we also oversee the active projects that are in design and construction kind of across the county. And so if we're building a new park, if we're doing renovations to a recreation center, things of that nature, those are all projects that are kind of initiated in my group. And then once they're complete, they move to one of 3 other divisions within Park and Recreation. Park operations, they go in and take care day-to-day of our parks and our athletic facilities. They do some athletic programming as well. Our recreation and aquatics team, they oversee our recreation centers and our aquatic centers. They do a lot of programming, including therapeutic programming. And then our nature preserves and natural resources team, which is well named because they oversee our nature preserves, our nature centers, and our nature-based programming and everything. So we kind of work with and for the other 3 divisions kind of within Park and Recreation. So about 5 years ago, we initiated an update to our comprehensive master plan, which is called MEC Playbook. And we wanted to do something a little different with this plan, and we wanted to lead with why. Why are we making the recommendations that we're making? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And so we started with 4 guiding principles, which are the principles that you see up here: commit to equity, evolve and grow, tell more stories, and move beyond boundaries. Because we wanted to be able to come back to these ideas no matter what decision we were trying to make. to make sure that we were grounded and we were doing the things that we heard through our public engagement as part of that plan. To help us kind of operationalize and figure out how we're going to take down and kind of achieve these principles, we created 17 goals. So 4 or 5 under each of those 4 guiding principles there. And they cover the gamut of what we offer from a park and recreation standpoint. We're going to focus a little bit more on 2 under commit to equity, and that's the reinvestment and the new investment items, and what we kind of talk about today. Because I think most folks, when they think about park and recreation, if it's not an active project, it's a park or a program at a recreation center or something like that. And a lot of the things that I work with kind of through a capital planning standpoint are with those physical facilities. So in that playbook, we had a couple of, I would say, strongly supported recommendations to move forward and to help us determine what we're going to fund in the next 10 years. The first was reinvestment. Before this time, we didn't have a comprehensive inventory and assessment of all of the facilities within our system. So we didn't really know how one park stacked up against all the other parks. And so we went through and completed an inventory and assessment of all of our existing facilities, our parks, our greenways, nature preserves, recreation centers, all the way down the line, to help us understand where we needed to reinvest in existing facilities first. And so we had a couple of parks, and we still do. We haven't gone in and completed the projects yet, but we had some parks that were in such bad shape that there's not much functional use there. So we know that we need to start directing our money in those areas to go and activate and take care of the assets that we already have before we bring anything else online. From an investment standpoint, over the last 25 years since I've been in the city, every broad survey that we've done of the community, Greenway Trails pops up as the #1 requested asset. And I'll go through and show you kind of a snapshot of where our Greenway system is today. But from an investment standpoint, Greenway Trails were kind of #1. And then we wanted to also make sure that we take advantage of partnerships where we can. And those could be partnerships with other public entities, the city, or the 6 towns within the county, because we cover everything countywide. It could be funding from the state or through the state from the federal government for funding on Greenway Trails and things of that nature. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of kind of where we are to date on some of the recommendations from that playbook. So Adrian talked a little bit about the annual budget. The other major funding source that we typically tap into for our larger projects is the capital improvement plan. And so that funds kind of the major reinvestment and investment projects in larger facilities. And it's planned 5 years in advance. So as of right now, we've got projects that are slated to get funding over the next 5 years and kind of design and construct and complete those projects. So when I look at projects kind of under investment here, tier 1, we've either completed, we are underway, or we've got funding allocated over the next 5 years on only 4 of those 18 investment projects. But remember, one of the things that we heard was we needed to make sure that we were reinvesting in what we had first. So that's been a major focus over the last several years from a capital improvement plan standpoint. And so at this point, we have funded 30 of the 34 tier 1 needs that we have from a park and a nature preserve standpoint, which is great. We've been able to take advantage not only of capital improvement plan dollars, but there was also American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we were able to take advantage of. We've got 4 parks that are funded through that. Several years ago, the board allocated $10 million of additional funding from an equity standpoint. And so we have completed or are about to complete 9 additional projects as part of that funding. So the benefit of having this longer range kind of idea of where our projects, or what projects we need is we have a very clear list of where the funding, when it becomes available, needs to be allocated. Let me say this real quick. The map that you see here gives just an illustration of where the projects that we're talking about that are funded are kind of across the county. So you'll notice a lot of those are kind of core to Uptown, and the reason is that's where a lot of our older parks are. So a lot of those reinvestment parks are parks that we have on the west side or the north side, a few on the east side that have been parks for a very long time. They're not new, and we haven't done any significant reinvestment in those. So we're working to go in and do that. From a greenway trail standpoint, I would say probably a bit more scattered and spread across the county here. We identified 30 Tier 1 projects, and we've got funding or we're underway on 10 of those projects right now. Something new for us from a greenway standpoint is reinvesting in existing greenway trails. Our greenway program, compared to some of our parks, are much more recent in terms of when they were constructed. But we have some that need some major reinvestment, particularly those that have an older wooden boardwalk that over time they tend to get slick and a little unsafe. So we wanted to make sure that we were taking care of our greenway trails before they get impacted too much from a maintenance standpoint. And just a snapshot of where we are. So as of today, we have almost 75 miles of paved greenway trail on the ground. We are under construction on another 16 miles. We are in design on another 10 miles. And we've got almost 7 miles funded in the future through the capital improvement plan. Funded by others. We have other partners that build trails as well. The city builds some trails as part of the Cross Charlotte Trail, which is kind of along Little Sugar Creek and Mallard Creek and Toby Creek within our broader greenway system, as well as the towns. The town of Cornelius has been, I would say, very active in going in and building some of the trails that they have kind of within their system. Facilities, we include within facilities more of the vertical structure. So our recreation centers, our aquatic centers, our nature centers, and our indoor pavilions. So from a reinvestment standpoint, we've already taken down and kind of funded and in some cases completed 3 of the 4 Tier 1 projects right there. And so that's exactly where we want to go. The Tier 2 and Tier 3 projects that we haven't funded yet are a mix of kind of our traditional recreation centers, some shared sites that we have at schools, and then some special use sites, tennis center, driving range, things of that nature. What we found since we've completed Met Playbook is that document doesn't do a great job of looking into the future to identify where we need to build future recreation facilities, specifically recreation centers. So when we think about our recreation centers, we think about them kind of in 3 categories. So first are our regional recreation centers, which we have 2 of right now. Northern Regional Recreation Center up in Cornelius, and Eastway Regional Recreation Center at Eastway Park over on the east side of town. And those are the 2 orange dots that you see on the map here. Our traditional or community recreation centers are the purple dots here. And you'll see there's a really dense concentration kind of in and around the Uptown area. Most of those were originally constructed about 50 years ago in the 70s. And so when you think about how the city has grown, you know, those are the older neighborhoods within the city and within the county. And then as growth has kind of pushed out in all directions from there, we haven't done a great job of keeping up with that growth from a recreation center standpoint. And then the blue dots that you see are shared sites. So we have recreation centers that are embedded in some schools. Most of them are elementary schools, but we have 1 or 2 that are embedded within middle schools as well. So what we're doing in anticipation of a mid-cycle update, a 5-year update of our master plan, is we're getting out ahead of that, and starting this month, we're doing a specific planning study for how we grow our recreation centers in the future. And so that will start with a reassessment of all of our existing centers, and then it will include recommendations for where and what type of recreation centers we build kind of across the county. And you can kind of see there are some places within the county that don't have easy access to recreation centers right now. So that's ultimately what we're looking to identify over the next 6 to 8 months as part of that study. Once we complete that study, we're going to roll it into our kind of mid-cycle or our 5-year update of that playbook. As we've seen, we've made some good strides. We've identified, completed some projects, funded other projects. So we need to update those project lists to identify the things that we need to concentrate on from a funding standpoint and an improvement standpoint over the next 5 years. So part of what we'll be doing in that mid-cycle update is sharing the successes that we've been able to accomplish within the first 5 years of that plan. Update our gap areas and our priority communities from an activation standpoint and from a land acquisition standpoint. Update investment and reinvestment project lists. So when funding comes available, we know exactly where we need to go and spend that money. Look at activating some of the parks or the parkland reserves. This is the land that we've purchased over the last 4 years or so. Look at how we want to strategically start to develop and improve those sites. And then include recreation center recommendations from the study that we talked a little bit about just a minute ago. So at a very high level, that's where we are right now. And I think is now the time that we start to take some questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed it is, and we have Mr. Ken Coombs with the first one.
Hopefully I'll be back twice more after this one, because you all said a lot of stuff. My first one's going to be in regards to the school board. Has the school board ever sought funds via tax hikes specifically targeting teacher pay raises? And if so, when, how much?
That's a great question. In North Carolina, school boards cannot levy taxes. So
They asked you, the county.
Oh, ask us to levy taxes? Not to my knowledge that they have asked us specifically levy a tax for this. The way we typically receive their request is a typical budget request with a dollar amount. They don't tell us levy this tax in order to pay for it. But they do include teacher raises and that sort of thing in those requests. Did that answer?
He'll re-ask that question if he needs
Oh, yeah, it's been a long day with Ms. Coombs. We got plenty of questions coming. So I have a question. For January 22nd and May 22nd, the public hearings, what does, and you know, throughout your experience, what does public advocation look like to implement ideas for the county, for them to be considered or adopted? What information is necessary, resourceful to, again, help push your the things you would like to see in your county?
Okay, so I can't necessarily tell you this is the formula for how to get something funding that you wanted funded. What I can tell you is how a public hearing typically works. People will sign up, there's a structure for how much time that they have. And when there is an issue that's of interest to a lot of people, there may be multiple speakers that then come out and speak about it. And then sometimes there'll be folks that make their case by presenting some information that they have or anecdotes that they have, but it all serves as information for the board. Thank you.
On the slide where you had the responsibilities for the county, the
Yes.
state, and the city,
This slide.
Yes. So the city is responsible for planning and zoning, but there's nothing under that responsibility for schools. So the school board has to plan for adequate schools capacity, but the city approves zoning for, certain densities without consulting with the school board, or, I don't know if they consult with you, but we've got all these apartment buildings, thousands of units, and there's not a school around. So I just wanted to ask you to comment on that.
Okay. Well, I can't comment very well on that because I do the budget. And so I don't want to speak out of turn for the city because I do not know how much that they are engaged with the school board in terms of planning and zoning. So I'm not going to be able to speak on behalf of the city. So that's what I'm doing.
What's on me? Hey, thank you both for being here. All right, so I'm a part of the West Boulevard Neighborhood Coalition, and I've looked at the 2040 plan, and I was just looking at the MEC playbook. My question for both of you, I think, from two different perspectives would be, what has been done relative to the parks, Bert, and the West Boulevard corridor specifically, separate from the historic West End? And what, is there any plans relative to the parks, or anything that's covered in the playbook in the next 5 years? And then I guess Adrian, right? When it comes to people talking about, like, how do we prioritize the parks in the budget? And I know there's a lot of effort to get that done, but how's that decision formally made? I just want to understand that from both sides.
Okay, I can start on that. So in terms of West Side, that's where we started to concentrate some of the equity funding that we got from the board in going in and identifying opportunities to reactivate or renovate existing facilities. Enderley Park, within the last several years, got a major upfit and uplift and expansion kind of within the same footprint of the park. Completely redid that park. We were able to kind of take back and reactivate Amy James Recreation Center. And we're in the process right now of updating the master plan of how we start to activate the property that sits on. From a connectivity standpoint, in several years, we're going to be extending Irwin Creek Greenway from where it ends right now at the Arbor Glen Outreach Center in Clanton Park and Clanton Road, connect it down not only to Amy James and that park and recreation center, but further connecting all the way down to Sugar Creek Greenway, which is a project that's actually going out to bid, I think this week or next week. So we're looking at things that we've already identified, and we have funding in place for some of those improvements. Looking into the future, well, also we're going to be renovating and expanding Bryant Park as well. Looking into the future, we want to connect Bryant Park to the existing Stewart Creek Greenway. We want to reinvigorate and reinvest at Camp Green Park and expand there. If you're familiar with that park, there's a portion of it that used to be activated years ago, where I believe the playground used to be. It's kind of central core to the park. That isn't an area that's improved right now. So we need to go in and kind of reactivate that and then connect that park to our greenway system as well, and give people the opportunity and the choice to be able to get to some of these places without having to get in their car and get there, if they want to walk, if they want to bike, things of that nature. So that's kind of how we've looked specifically kind of on the west end. And the last thing I'll note, we had the old Dowd house that was sold, but we retained about an acre of land adjacent to that. And using the proceeds of that sale, we were able to go in and create a new park, Dowd Park, that's kind of within the neighborhood right there as well.
And I think your question was, how do the budget priorities, how are those made?
How does the budget prioritize as well?
Okay. So our budget, first off, we have our board priorities. That helps to inform kind of what are going to be the interests of the board. We also have, we have the feedback that we get from our community engagement. But there's a whole bunch of our budget which are things that we just have to do. They are state responsibilities, things that we have a requirement to fund. In terms of the capital, they also go through, kind of a set of review criteria and present that with the Capital Advisory Board and then present that to the board. All of that is confined within how much funding is available. Because we do have a lot of different revenue streams, but really the only revenue stream that counties have control over is the property tax. And so that is ultimately a decision that the Board of County Commissioners has to make in terms of what is affordable, in terms of capital, what is affordable, and what type of leverage do we want to take out in terms of debt. So those all kind of set the boundaries around what can be budgeted.
Thank you, Dr. Blanche Penn here. Two quick questions. With affordable housing and seniors adults, can you explain to us who are you giving this money to? Because I know a lot of people that still homeless. So I really want to know how that works and how do people find out about it. And as seniors, we need to understand what that means and where do we go. And Bert, with Make Playbook, it's a couple of us that used to be on Park and Rec Board. And I did help with that Make Playbook, but you say you had 4 ideas to the Make Playbook. Can you explain just a little quickly about that process and how is it going?
All right, so I'll speak first about the affordable housing initiatives that we have. We do provide some housing support, and we do that through some different programs. Most of those are managed by LaShonda Hart in the manager's office. We also have access online. If anybody has an interest, they can connect with her in terms of accessing some of those services. We have entered into some agreements with naturally occurring affordable housing so that we're able to protect those units by providing some funding to make sure that they can keep the cost of the rent low. And we do those when the projects become available, and we have to evaluate whether the project makes sense. So it's not just one project, it's multiple projects. We're also doing, kind of in the same vein, we're doing critical home repair. And we do that through a couple of our other partners as well, like Habitat for Humanity and a few other ones, where we go out and where there is need for critical home repair in order to keep somebody in their home so that it's affordable. We do some of those programs as well. And I think we've got about $2.5 billion dedicated to that this year.
And the senior piece?
And the senior piece is going to depend on the programs. So some of the NOAA projects that we do are specifically, they were housing units specifically serving senior population.
Good morning, Dr. Lynn. So in terms of the guiding principles, it was something that we saw before we started our process. We started to look at other cities that are highly ranked or are known for having really good park and recreation systems. And we looked at the master plans that they had done. And that was a step that they had taken that we hadn't done in the past. I think in the past, you go back and look at our master plan that was done in 2008, it's much more of kind of a technical document. And we wanted to go a little bit deeper than that. Commit to equity was kind of the first guiding principle, and that actually came out of the Park and Recreation Commission All Advisory Council meeting that we had back in February of 2020 when we didn't really know what COVID was, and then a month later it kind of made itself known to everybody. But it was part of that process, and so the way that kind of evolved into how we kind of go and operationalize that, we identified priority communities within the county as a whole. And so a priority community, we looked at census data and we identified areas of the county that had higher than average percentages of youth, of seniors, residents of color, of residents that experience poverty, or residents that rent rather than own. And where we have 2 or more of those factors, That's included within our priority communities. When we go back and we look at the tier 1 and tier 2 projects that we go in and fund from a reinvestment or investment standpoint, every tier 1 project is within a priority community. So we wanted to make sure that we were not only spending the money at the facility that needed the most help, but it was in the area that is going to benefit the most from having access to public open space and recreation centers and things of that nature.
Adrian, I was surprised to see that the budget is now about 36 million.
Our budget's $2.5 billion.
That's so interesting because I remember the first time Manager Jones came out with $1 million budget. And it just shocked everybody. So that's been quite a while. But I also wanted to say, Blanche was mentioning several folk who served on the Park and Recreation Board. I served under Marion Deal under the old City Commission. And I'm glad to see that we've moved ahead. Now to have you here today, one of the questions we want to know where in the way of priority is a West Regional Center.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we're doing the broader study that we're doing right now. When you look at kind of the map or the distribution of where our centers are right now, ideally, we would be able to go and identify the location of that in an area that doesn't have access to a recreation center. We don't necessarily want to create competition for our own other recreation centers. And so we want to do that kind of from a database process. So the big question is that we're looking to answer over the next several months is where we want to locate additional recreation centers and regional recreation centers. Regional centers are still relatively new for us. Eastway has been in operation for about 3 years and Northern for about 2 years. Each of those centers require about 100 to 110 people to employ kind of at a full time. When we look at our traditional recreation centers, they're between 12 and 15,000 square feet. These facilities are between 85 and 95,000 square feet. They are very, very different. And the idea behind it, I think, has been very, very well received. The idea behind it at a high level is we want to offer everything that we offer as a department at this location. I will say they've been extraordinarily successful. We have gotten that question many, many times. When are you going to build the next one? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be near where I live? And my hope is that I'll be able to answer that here very, very soon. But that's something that we're still working toward. I'll also note, I know this for Northern, I don't really know this for Eastway. From a membership standpoint, we had some goals that we set before we opened the center. And in the first year there, I think we met the goal that we had for like year 3, or by year 3 or year 4. It's been very, very well received. And one of the differences between that center and Eastway is somewhat close to some of our other existing centers at Methodist Homes and at Sugar Creek. Northern is in an area where we don't have a center kind of nearby. And so I think it underscored how important it is to identify and locate those in areas that don't have currently access to a facility of that type.
Good morning. This question is for Adrian. Monique Drayton with the Charlotte Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. We were looking at the previous year's budget, and I think around page 200, I could be wrong, but we were looking at the funds allocated for MWSBEs, DBEs, whatever we're calling it on that day, and it looked as if it was about 10% of funds in fiscal year 2025 went towards MWSBEs, which is around $69 million. However, usually when you are looking at funding or looking at anything for MWSBEs, it doesn't drill down specifically to Black people or Black women-owned businesses. And so statistically, we know that white women typically will receive the bulk of MWSBE funds. Is there a way for you all to drill down so we can see how much money was spent or allocated for Black women-owned businesses Usually it's around 0.9% out of the 10%, but is there a way that you all can drill down and that information could be transparent? Same question, it's kind of in the same vein. Is there, they're watching. I said one question, but is there also a way for us to, so if there are goals for MWBE, Black women-owned businesses, is there a dashboard or something that we would be able to see so that we can track and know how much money we're receiving?
Those are great questions, and I'm probably not the one to answer those. That would be our asset facility management or our economic development that manage all of our MWSB component of our capital projects.
How much was allocated there?
You are watching.
Okay.
I'll add a little bit to that, just from a construction project standpoint. Before we advertise a project to go out to bid, we meet with staff from Business Diversity and Inclusion, and there are goals for that project that are set. Women-owned and minority-owned businesses, and those are set. Typically, they're around 6 to 8% kind of that total project. I don't recall seeing numbers that show how those break out. So that'll take us asking a few questions of some of our other county counterparts to see where that information, if it exists, and where it exists for folks to be able to get to it.
Okay. Wow. We got enough greenway land to walk from here to Greensboro. My questions go, well, first of all, years ago I served as a subcommittee chair of the County Citizens Capital Improvement Committee. And did quite well, I think. But my question is, how do you navigate around the big elephant in the room, which is private development competition for a dwindling available supply of land for public projects?
So we do that in a couple of different ways. Our master plan identified 17 key areas across the county that we need to go and, one, acquire land for future facility development, and then two, go in and actually develop and activate those properties. So we've been very strategic and very well supported over the last 4 years from the board in terms of the money allocated to go through land acquisition. In many cases, we are up against competition from private development. The way that we value land from an appraisal standpoint is a little bit different than the way a developer is going to look at land, because they're looking at their rate of return. So they're thinking in terms of what it's going to be and how much money they'll be able to take out of it. And we're looking at the value of it today. And so in some cases, we lose out to private developers there. But I'll say in that 4-year time period, we've acquired over 1,700 acres of land across the county. We have kind of closed down a number of those kind of identified gap areas. In addition to that, we have been more deliberate in requesting land for Greenway or for future parks through the rezoning and development process, mostly through the city of Charlotte. We don't have development authority at the county. It's either the city of Charlotte or one of the 6 towns. We work and review a lot of land development and rezoning plans and make requests in areas that are in gap areas or areas where we don't have land for public open space or along those greenway corridors. So we haven't done it just from an acquisition standpoint. We're also kind of working with developers from the initiation of those rezonings, and we've been able to see some gains through that process. It takes a lot of background work, kind of from a staff standpoint, but I think it's worth it. And now we've got to figure out how we can go in. We've got the land, now we got to go and kind of activate that land for public benefit.
Good morning. My name is Bobby Drake Pruitt, and I'm in the real estate industry. And my question or comment is really good timing, given Ken's question, your response. And certainly Lynn is being bought at rates we've never seen, and the county has been more proactive and been really wise. So my question really related to that, or more perhaps a suggestion, is great you gave that background where you talked about how through rezonings, the counties requiring or requesting developers convey greenway land. There are often pieces that are between, I have two examples currently I'm involved with, where there are parcels between parcel that you're getting an easement from us, and then there's a gap, then there's the greenway on the other side. So my question is, will the county begin to, via eminent domain, start to, acquire those parcels? Because some of those pieces will never be redeveloped, and if you don't, you'll have these gaps and these disconnected greenways, at least on the map.
So the county does not like to use condemnation, except for in extreme circumstances. Our approach has always been that we want to work with landowners and help kind of illustrate the broader kind of community benefits. I've been with the county for 11 years, 5 as a project manager, 6 in my current role. I can think of maybe 5 or 6 instances where we have gone to the board. So the way it works is, we work with a property owner typically for several years until we go to the board and request the opportunity to go through acquisition through eminent domain. I can't think of more than 5 or 6 times that we've done that. Only one of those times I know it's gotten to almost to court, and literally the day before we were supposed to go to court, we were able to settle with the property owners there. So the answer is, ultimately, it's something that has been exercised, but it's been very, very few and unique circumstances to be able to go. I would say we've been much more successful in working with the property owner and talking with them, finding out the pain points that they have, and working with them to try to go in and make those connections happen. I will add that one of the projects that we'll be starting, or one of the funding lines that we'll be starting next year, is doing exactly that. We identified 12 or 13 connections across the county to existing parks and existing greenways that we're going to go in and build. It's not something that we funded in that way before, but we identified it's so much easier and less expensive to make it easier for folks to get to existing facilities and make that connection possible than to go and build a whole new facility somewhere else. And so I'm eager to start that process. And also, if you have any specific instances, reach out to me and let me know, because I think this is going to be a very successful kind of approach. And the way that it happened is we would have one-off conversations with developers or property owners or residents that would say, hey, if we only had a trail here, we could get to the park without having to get in our car. We could, our kids could ride the bike or something like that. And so share those opportunities that you see, and we'll start to continue to note those. And once we take these initial projects down, we'll look to fund another round of projects like that.
I just think it's being proactive, perhaps.
We got rules. So again, we don't have banter. There's no back and forth. The answer you receive is the answer you have to accept. With that said, I have a question to kind of piggybacking off the information you've given us. When I look at the map of Mecklenburg County with the amenities and project areas, it seems to have persisted. Yeah. So I'm looking for that 5-mile radius within Badersford Road from, let's say, Sunset down to Uptown. And I know personally, I live in McCrory Heights. We have advocated for a trail to go uptown since 2016. And the reason being, my family and I, we walk uptown for our weekend fun activity, and it is terrifying walking over the 4th Street Bridge. And we have a natural trail with Irwin Creek that will go along, and I wanted to know, and we worked with so many people and found that local government succession plans are non-existent, so when the person leading the project gets a promotion or goes away, all of the hard work just drops. So we can never, even within the optimism of Secretary Buttigieg and his wanting to reconnect America, we still could not find avenues to get the things that I feel the community is owed from being cut off. Where do those conversations begin that can have legs? Because we've done everything across the book that is suggested, and we still find ourselves nowhere.
Yeah, I think Adrian did a really good job illustrating what the county does versus what the city does, or the federal government, because we got the interstate that was placed there as a division kind of between areas years and years and years ago. We learned about this, and so the way that we think about connectivity is through our greenway system. Irwin Creek, most people may not know, actually goes under to the west side of I-77, right where Ray's Splash Planet is. I guess that's 5th Street that's right there. And so we conducted and completed kind of a routing study to identify opportunities that we have to connect the west side, particularly kind of in that area, along Irwin Creek Greenway. Once you get over the interstate, there's a really natural way to make that connection. But you illustrated what the problem is. It's getting over or potentially under the interstate. So there is a really long culvert that the stream moves through that's under I-77, right at Ray's Splash Planet. We went and we walked through that and looked at it. We've done a study as to what we would need to do in order to create a trail within that. We've got an example, 100 yards away here, right under Parkwood Avenue, where we utilize an existing culvert and we put the trail under there. The problem with that is when we have a major rain event, it's full of water. So is that the best way to go in and do that? It's the easiest way for us to be able to go and do that from an expense standpoint, but is it the right thing to go in and do? We went ahead and moved forward with our study because we're continuing to hear a lot of talk about expanding lanes or potentially toll lanes on I-77. And we wanted to have that study in hand so that if and when that occurs, we can say, the road project is great, but we have this need from a bike ped standpoint. We were able to do that and leverage kind of that longer range planning in Huntersville. This was partially town of Huntersville and Bill Cox, who was a long time transportation planner up there. But when the toll lanes were built along I-77 there, they built for us the tunnel for the Greenway Trail through there. We just activated that and completed that project. It's open now. I think we activated it back in June or July of last summer. So it's a concrete example of how we were able to use the way we think about connectivity in our planning and leverage those federal dollars to be able to go in and make the connections that, in this case, were severed years and years ago. Or in the case of Huntersville, connections that were never realized just because they hadn't been developed at that point.
Okay, so just so you know, with our chapter, we have over 1,000, well, close to 1,000 women. So they're all asking me questions. I know I can only ask one. So I'm getting bombarded with questions to ask you, Mr. Cox. So the one question out of the many is, can money specifically, we're still on MWBEs right now, okay. Can money specifically be designated or allocated for Black women-owned businesses?
I don't know the answer to that question, but if we can connect after this, I can take your question and we can go to somebody who can answer that question. Two, I also want to talk with you a little bit about the budget page you're referencing, make sure I understand what you're looking at. So if we can connect after this, I'll try to get you an answer.
Okay, I have a question, my question is in reference to the way that you acquire the land and who works with locating the land for Park and Rec. Back in the day when I worked with Park and Rec, we had a real estate person, a private real estate person, and they were not my color. Do you all still have the real estate realtor coming in to locate and work with the Park and Rec on the land? And are any of them, do any of them look like me?
So we actually work with our real estate division, which is part of asset facility management in Mecklenburg County. The manager of that group is Jacqueline McNeil. She's a Black woman. And she's been in that position for 20 years, I think 20 years or so. I worked directly with her when I was at Asset Facility Management as a project manager, and I work directly with her and her staff today. So the process at a high level, Park and Recreation staff identify land, or we're made aware of land from Jacqueline or her team, or a third-party resident about a piece of land that may be available. We do an assessment of that land to determine if it's something that would fit within our portfolio. Is it in an area where we need a park? Is it along a future greenway corridor? Things of that nature. And if we prioritize that, if we deem that kind of a high priority, then we turn that over to Jacqueline and her team. The vast majority of the outreach that's done is done by county staff. It's not done by a third-party realtor. There are some third-party realtors that Jacqueline is using right now. More of that work is being done along greenway corridors because we know that those are kind of identified. We've got time to kind of work on those unless it's an active project. If it's an active project or a funded project, then Jacqueline or someone on her team are overseeing that. But the vast majority of the outreach work that we do is being done by county staff.
We're gonna have to start keeping to our rules of 30 seconds for the question. And if you could keep your answer to a minute. 30
seconds for the question and 1 minute for the answer.
Excuse me, can you repeat Jacqueline's last name and the team? And then I've got a question for you, Adrian.
Yeah, it's Jacqueline McNeil.
McNeil.
Yep. She is the real estate manager for asset and facility management. So asset and facility management, they oversee services across for other county departments. They've got real estate, fleet management. They oversee all the design and construction projects.
Okay, and Adrian, how can we access those nonprofits you were talking about that are often funded?
What do you mean by access them?
How can we know those nonprofits that receive funding from the county?
Okay, so many of the nonprofits, what you'll see, if you look on our budget website, you will see our community service grants. Within our budget book, we identify those ones that we provide grants to. But there are lots and lots of nonprofits that we work with. We work with them as contractors and other things. So we may not have a list of all of them, but the primary ones that you'll see are those community service grants.
All right, Mr. Combs.
From an experience of years gone by, and things do change. To her question in regards to minority women, at one point there was, when general contractors received contracts to do work, part of the requirement was that they would have specifically targeted goals for MBEs. And does that pattern still, is that rubber still meeting the road in terms of when you award a contract for development? Are those developers still held accountable for MBE participation and thereby the opportunity for those MWBEs to interface with those general contractors to get those pieces of the pie?
Yes, we still have those requirements as part of our contract.
Good morning. Sorry I was late. Heat islands, stream degradation, trees, soil and water conservation district. We're your partners. We want to conserve 13,000 acres of farmland. How can we partner with you all, get community agriculture into the gardens, into the parks, make a partnership whereby we save green space, serve our population, and make us more healthy?
I would say that would be a combination of reaching out to myself at Park and Recreation and Erin Stanforth. She's the sustainability manager in the manager's office. And they've got positions and programs in place now for farmland conservation. From our standpoint, when we go in and develop a park, our goal is to only develop up to 50% of that park. In nature preserves, it's only 10%. So we protect and retain that tree canopy that we have. And the reason it's a goal, we don't have tree canopy to protect in an urban park, like Romeo Beard Park or something like that. But the vast majority of our facilities, we're able to do that and kind of maintain that canopy.
All right, so another question for Adrian. When it comes to nonprofit pitching their space into the budget, is it based on, or is the result based on a negotiation, or is it just what the county sees the level of support would be adequate for said organization, or how does the funding actually get to the space where it is?
So we have a formal grant process, and they have to submit several things about their strategy, what they plan to accomplish, as well as the outcomes that they're going to achieve for the specific program that they're providing. That's then reviewed by a panel of experts before a recommendation is made in the budget.
Okay, last question. On page 20 of the FY25 budget, $152.8 million was dedicated to the 6 priorities. As a footnote, it talked about racial disparities. How do you all determine the allocation for those 6 priorities to make sure that racial disparities are addressed? And again, what is the tracking? Because what I did see, what I did see is that there are, so there may be money allocated for projects initiatives. That's great, but there's not any tracking to determine if you're really reaching goals. So if the priority is health access, I have a long career in healthcare, health access, but there's no real tracking measures. How do you know you're really reaching your goal if you've allocated money towards that? Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's 2 questions, though. The first one, sorry, I'm not the rule keeper. I got to answer both of them. So the first one,
your name has been added to the list of potential.
The reason there's a footnote on reducing racial disparities is because I believe it was 2022 at our budget retreat. The board acknowledged that reducing racial disparities is not a priority like the other 6 priorities that we have, but rather it is a cross-cutting function of everything that we do. And so we intentionally try to incorporate that when we're coming up with strategies. Now, to answer your other question about how do we track performance, we have the Office of Strategy and Innovation, and they work with our departments and externally, and they track thousands of different metrics, and they have a whole complete list of all the metrics that we track that are aligned to those strategies. So you may not see all of those in our budget book. It's big enough already, and so we don't try to pack all that in there, but we do measure our success and try to see if we're meeting those goals.
With that said, we would like to give, we have one more question from Ms. Jackie, and then we're Carrie, yes. Ms. Jackie, I told Carrie weeks ago. I was going to ask a question.
Thank you. This is regarding Parks and Rec. I work with the YMCA, Greater Charlotte, and as a board member, and can you speak to collaboration between the Greater Charlotte Y and Parks and Rec facilities?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there isn't a whole lot. So we have kind of shared interest down in Valentine at the YMCA down there that's adjacent to Valentine Regional Park. And so we have shared use of some of the fields and things that are associated with the site of that YMCA. I do know before I came over to Park and Recreation, there were discussions of having a shared indoor pavilion or some kind of a smaller indoor facility project that never came to fruition for one reason or another. So there isn't a whole lot to talk about in terms of how we kind of collaborate or partner right now.
Bert, for many years, Mecklenburg County was very low in the country when it came to open spaces.
Mm-hmm.
How is our ranking now?
We're still pretty low. So the measures that are used for that don't necessarily align with the priorities that our residents share with us. For instance, greenway trails are not one of the amenities that are tracked. And we've put, pretty tremendous investment in our greenway system over the last 20 years and quite a bit over the last 5 to 6 years, bless you. And where we fall short is in access per 10-minute walk. A few things work against us. The biggest of those is the size of our county. So we're 550 square miles. That makes up all of Mecklenburg County. And we're being measured against Washington, D.C., which has a much, much, much smaller and much more dense footprint. The density in D.C., I think, is about 10 times the average of the density here. And so just from an access standpoint, we know that we're never going to measure up to a Minneapolis or a St. Paul or Washington, D.C. from that standpoint. But we have identified the areas where we need to make it easier to get the public open space, and that's what we're working toward. It's one measure. We actually measure very high in terms of total acreage, but it's the access measure that really pushes us down that list.
All right, with that said, we would love to give a round of applause for both Bert and Adrian. Thank you so much. We will go into it now. Let me ask you, will we have access to the presentation? Can we get that to Steve?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we will go into announcements. If you have announcements, please let us know. Anybody? No announcements? Jenny? I know you have an announcement, right? No? Okay.
I just wanted to let everybody know the precinct work in identifying chairs for precincts is by the African American Caucus is going really well. We still need precinct chairs. Shay, I did send the email to you like at 1 in the morning. But to identify which precincts still need chairs. So if you are interested, please take a look at, once the list is posted, if you live in a precinct that is unorganized, please consider being a precinct chair because that will increase voter turnout around 28%. And we have elections coming up in August, September. So please consider being a precinct chair.
Good morning. I'm here for the bond, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, and I want to let you guys know, if you follow us on social media, the CMS Bond Info social media platforms, and next week on Thursday, January 23rd at 5:30, we have the project update meeting for the Cotswold Elementary School meeting, where architects are going to be talking about what is going to happen to that school. That school is going to be demo, and they're going to build a new building in that property. So I would like to invite you guys, and on February 27th, we have the second ward Magnet High School meeting. So I would like to invite you guys as well. It's at Hawthorne Academy. So if you have any other questions, just come to me and ask me, but I would like to let you know that, you know, the money is moving and the constructions are moving, so it's a lot happening right now.
Thank you so much. Any other announcements? All right, Shay?
We're still celebrating the wonderful turnout on December 14th through Reads Across America at Cedar Grove Cemetery in Beatties Ford. Ken Coates was wonderful enough to put together a memorable book, or commemorative book. I just wanted to share that with everyone, invite you to take a look. Thank Ken once again, and check us out at savecedargrove.org. Also wanted to make an announcement that the Tuesday Morning Forum is very excited to ramp up our promotion and engagement with Phil in the Room, with younger folks and folks in general. We'd love to see you out here. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, my name is Jay Hill. The next Power Mixer is on March 5th. We will be celebrating food in Charlotte. Winston made me talk, Miss Jackie, so that's why I'm doing this thing.
All right, Ms. Coons.
As you all know, the annual time that they give us to boast about our places in history is February 1st, Black History Month. So I'm urging any of you who may be involved in any projects regarding Black History Month, please, please, incorporate some new people and quit rolling out every year the same people who did the same thing years ago. Please, find some new people to talk about. There's thousands and thousands of them.
With that said, on Tuesday, February 4th, we will get into our annual Black History Month programming, which starts again with Run This Town. That is a panel discussion featuring Charlotte's 4 Black past and present mayors. Anthony Fox, Harvey Gantt, Pat Cannon, and Vi Lyles will be here. Might be the first time they all in the same room having a conversation. So that will set it off. February 11th, we will. The subject is 7 Stories in Brooklyn. That is a panel discussion about the development of Independence Plaza, the professional building that was once in Brooklyn, led by the development consortium of Julius Chambers, Mel Wyatt, James Ferguson, amongst others. So it's going to be an amazing time. If you have announcements, please send them to Steve at S. Johnston with a T at TuesdayForumCharlotte.org. If all heads and minds are clear, we will see you next week. Thank you. Next week's open forum. Next week, open forum. Next week, open forum. Bring your ideas, bring your thoughts. Now we know how to advocate for things we want to the county. Next week, open forum. You guys got cards? Thank you so much for the information.